When my wife died, my son said, "You can't bring Mom back, and my wife's birthday is only once a year." These words hit me like a slap in the face. The next day, he came to me with a vital request, as if nothing had happened. It was my chance to make amends for the insult he had inflicted on me and his late mother, and I took that chance. My name is Thomas Reed, 66, retired builder, former Army logistics. I keep firm habits from service, including early calls and written plans. I speak plainly, and I expect the same from family. At 8:30 a.m., I dialed my son, Kyle, and adjusted my black tie. Margaret's coffee cup sat on the counter with a faint lipstick mark. I checked my wristwatch and kept the phone to my ear. 4 rings passed before his voice came through with a sleepy tone. Loud music carried through the line from his house in Davenport. A woman shouted about decorations, and I recognized Sophie's voice clearly. "Kyle, it's Dad. The funeral starts at 11:30, and I steadied my grip. "I told you yesterday, Sophie's, birthday party is tonight," and laughter sounded. "Your mother's funeral is today," and I kept my voice steady and plain. "Mom isn't coming back, and my wife's birthday is only once a year." I heard the words cleanly and felt a sharp shock in my chest. "You are listed as a pallbearer. We need you here on time. Caterers are coming. The band is setting up. We planned this for months." The call ended with a dial tone after a brief silence from both ends. I looked at the funeral program and crossed his name off carefully. I drew a long line through the slot and put down my pen. I noted the time again, 8:47, then locked the door. The chapel filled slowly with neighbors and Margaret's garden club friends from our street. The pastor greeted me with quiet words and a firm handshake. Patricia, Margaret's sister, asked, "Where is Kyle? Did he get delayed on the road?" "He has important commitments," and I kept my eyes on the front pew. Mrs. Henderson leaned close and said, "Margaret was always proud of that boy." I stood at the casket and counted faces. 23 people showed up. Kyle was not among them, and the space near me stayed open. The pastor spoke about family bonds and long marriages built on daily effort. I listened without moving and kept my hands together near my belt. The cemetery crew lowered the casket, and I watched without looking away. Dirt hit the top as part of the process, with measured movements. I signed the burial paperwork near the tent and folded it once. I drove home without the radio and set my keys on the hook. The house was quiet, and I hung my jacket on the chair. Margaret disliked that leather chair and said it clashed with her floral curtains. Our wedding photo stood on the mantel in a plain wooden frame. We married in Davenport and promised to share everything we could manage. We built the business from long weeks and careful spending across many years. In the bedroom, I found her Bible with a bookmark in Psalms. A note slipped out and landed near the lamp on the table. "My dearest Tom, please don't let Kyle forget us," written in careful script. I held the note and read it twice with steady breaths between lines. In the closet, I found a labeled box she had tucked behind sweaters. Inside were Kyle's report cards from kindergarten through college, stacked by year. She wrote small notes on sticky paper and attached them near the grades. "So proud," and "Our brilliant boy" appeared across many years of papers. The graduation photo showed Kyle in his cap with a bright expression. We had paid for the degree with overtime and skipped extras to cover bills. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out old bank records and receipts. I set up neat piles on the mahogany desk next to my calculator. I listed college tuition, 4 years at $52,000 each year. I added graduate school, $48,000, for an MBA he never finished. I added his European trip, $35,000, which he called a break. I wrote down the house down payment, $350,000, fully covered. I listed wedding costs, $75,000, after he chose a large venue. I included his first car, $35,000, which we bought in cash. I added 2 emergency loans for vacations that he called non-refundable. I added transfers to cover Sophie's shopping and small business attempts. I turned to Margaret's small notebook and read her careful entries again. Anniversary dinner canceled. Needed $5,000 for Kyle's car repair last month. Postponed doctor visit until next paycheck. Sent Kyle money for Sophie's birthday. I entered each amount and watched the running total rise on the screen. The final number reached $847,000 across 15 years. I set down the pen and rested my hand on the desk for a minute. My father gave me one sentence before I left his house at 18. Build your own character, and he handed me $20 for gas. I looked at our kitchen again and saw the get well cards on the counter. We had eaten simple meals while Kyle built a lifestyle he presented proudly. A car engine idled outside for a moment and then moved down the street. I did not walk to the window, and I did not call back. At 6 the next morning, I made coffee and opened fresh file folders. I labeled them by topic and date and stacked them in 2 columns: Kyle Education, Kyle House, Kyle Wedding, and Kyle Extras in printed labels. I kept my desk clear and set the receipts nearby in simple piles. The phone rang at 9, and I saw Kyle's name on the screen. "Hey, Dad. Hope you're okay after yesterday." And he spoke in a cheerful tone. He did not use the word funeral, and did not ask about Margaret directly. "We need to cover some unexpected costs from Sophie's birthday party last night. We hired a live band and took everyone to that new steakhouse. I bought Sophie a diamond bracelet because she deserves the best from me. The bills are due now, so can you send $15,000 today?" I looked at the piles on my desk and kept my breathing steady. No, and I held the phone with a firm grip and a straight back. There was silence, and I heard movement and a faint door closing. "What do you mean, no? Is there a problem with the bank today?" "I mean, no, I will not give you any more money now." His cheerful tone dropped, and I heard Sophie call out from another room. "Are you seriously refusing after everything this week? This is petty behavior." "Your mother wanted you at her funeral," and I kept my voice controlled. "We will figure this out with more credit if you will not help. But do not expect us to come around much if this continues." The threat was clear and familiar, and it matched many past calls. "I understand," and I kept my voice even and my words short. "You what? Are you even listening? We need you to step up here." "Take care, Kyle." And I ended the call before he pushed another demand. I placed the phone face down and looked at the clock on the wall. I moved the folder marked Kyle Employment to the center of my desk. I unlocked the laptop and opened his personnel record with a steady hand. I checked tomorrow's schedule and cleared the morning for an early meeting. I straightened the stack of documents and pushed my chair in slowly. I turned off the kitchen light and stood alone in the quiet hallway. I asked one clear question and let it sit in the room. What value does my presence still hold when respect is not present? I woke up calm and decided to draw a clear boundary today. I would stop funding adult choices and protect the business I built. I would make changes that lasted beyond one hard day. At 7:30, I unlocked my office at Reed Construction and turned on the light. The wall clock showed 7:31, and I opened Kyle's personnel file. I reviewed missed deadlines and vendor complaints, and I checked the expense reports. I saw long lunches recorded during critical inspections and inflated mileage on short routes. I opened my notebook and wrote a simple checklist for the morning. That habit came from Army logistics, where checklists prevented sloppy outcomes. I called the HR director, Linda Park, and asked her to join me at 8:45. She arrived on time with a neutral face and a plain folder. "We will follow policy," and she placed the folder on the desk. Documented warnings, timestamps, security steps, and badge deactivation after the meeting. I nodded once and moved Kyle's file to the center of the desk. I checked that the termination paperwork listed performance grounds and compliance language. I opened the intercom and asked the receptionist to notify security discreetly. "Have Mike Torres wait near the hallway in case he is needed." I rehearsed a short message and kept it under 30 seconds in length. I would keep my voice even and focus on company standards and duties. At 9:28, I stood by the window and the lobby door opened. Kyle's laugh traveled up the hall and the coffee machine clicked. "Kyle, come to my office now." And I kept the intercom button pressed. "Sure, Dad. Give me 1 minute to grab my coffee." "Now, Kyle." And I released the button and waited in silence. He walked in at 9:31, and he saw Linda and the folder. His eyes moved from the folder to my hands on the desk. "What's with the setup?" And he tried a light tone with a smile. "Your employment at Reed Construction ends today, effective immediately." And I slid papers forward. He stared at the header and looked back at me with confusion. "You're joking, right? We can talk about this like normal people." "Review the documents and sign where marked," and I set a pen down. He flipped a page and scanned the listed issues and dates. "You can't be serious. This is the family business. My future is here. This is a workplace and performance matters," and I kept my posture straight. "I can improve performance if you give me a fair chance. You have had years of chances," and I pointed to the performance log. He pushed the chair back and shook his head in disbelief. "At least give me severance. I have 8 years of service on file." At-will management roles do not include severance under our policy, and I waited. "You're doing this because of yesterday. You are being emotional and unfair." "I am doing this because the work has not been done on time. Mom would not want this. She would tell you to help me. Your mother asked for respect and responsibility, and neither appeared yesterday." Linda slid the acknowledgement page closer with a steady movement. "Sign the receipt for property return and badge deactivation before leaving." He looked at the door and then at me with a hard stare. "If I leave today, everyone will assume the worst about our family. Protecting the company protects every job in this building," and I left it there. He signed the page and dropped the pen with a small thud. I pressed the desk buzzer once and waited without another word. Mike stepped into the doorway with a neutral posture and calm voice. "We will collect your items and escort you to the lobby." Kyle stood and held his coffee mug with a tight grip. "You are humiliating me in front of everyone who works for you. You created the record that led to this room, and I kept still." He walked out with security, and the hallway went quiet after 2 minutes. I looked at the management wall and paused by his framed photo. I lifted it down and placed it face down in a drawer. I left the empty space on the wall and returned to my desk. Linda waited by the door and gave a small nod. "IT has disabled his email and changed the admin codes already. Coordinate building access and put his parking pass on the invalid list." She made a note and left to handle the checklist items. I took one slow breath and called the floor supervisors to a brief meeting. "Kyle's role is closed. Your reporting line goes directly to me for now. Standards remain the same, and projects continue as scheduled," and I paused. "Any questions about work should come through your project leads this week." They nodded and left the office with steady steps and quiet faces. At 10:45, the receptionist called through with an urgent warning. "Sophie Reed just walked in without an appointment and is asking for you." "Send her in," and I stood beside the desk rather than behind it. Sophie entered fast with raised tone and an angry expression. "How dare you fire Kyle? You have destroyed our plans and our life. This is a workplace, not a family living room," and I kept my hand still. "You owe us severance, at least 6 months. He worked here 8 years. At-will management roles do not receive severance under policy or law. We will sue for wrongful termination. You are acting from grief and spite. Performance documentation covers 8 years of issues and missed obligations." She glanced at the hallway and stepped closer to the desk. "Margaret would be ashamed of this. She would stand with her son. Margaret asked for respect at her funeral yesterday, and Kyle was absent." She pointed at me and raised her voice again with heat. "You are unstable and should not be in charge of anything important." I pressed the buzzer, and Mike returned with 2 guards behind him. "Escort Mrs. Reed to the lobby and note that she is not allowed back." She pulled her arm away and glared at me with open anger. "We will make sure everyone knows what you have done to us. Tell the truth if you share anything," and I held her gaze. She left the doorway under escort and continued to complain down the hall. I stood still and waited for the building to settle into normal work. I went to the lobby and spoke to the staff in plain terms. Mrs. Reed is not allowed in the building without an appointment. We will return to our duties and keep the day on schedule. They nodded and returned to their desks without comment or delay. I walked back to my office and closed the door. I picked up Margaret's photo from the credenza and set it near the monitor. I opened my calendar and confirmed a 2:30 appointment with Robert Chen. I gathered the will, insurance papers, and the financial records I had prepared. I arrived at his office on time and sat across from his desk. A single window showed Main Street, and the blinds were half open. Robert leaned in and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "We will update your estate plan now, if you are ready. I am ready to remove Kyle as a beneficiary and create a foundation." He paused to be sure, and then asked 2 direct questions. "You understand the legal effect, and you want it to begin today?" "I do," and I placed Margaret's will on the desk near the file. "The foundation purpose is scholarships and cancer research in Margaret's name." He wrote notes and pulled a template trust from a separate drawer. "We will form an irrevocable trust and place company assets under it. Irrevocable means you cannot change it freely after execution." And he waited. "I understand, and I want protection from lawsuits and outside demands. We will name you as trustee while you live and add 2 successors. Name the foundation board and the bank for custodial accounts. List Robert Chen, Pastor Allen, and Linda Park for the board. Update life insurance beneficiaries to the trust and the foundation," he said. "Also update retirement accounts and any payable on death designations," he added. "Yes, update every account and remove Kyle from any listed place. Leave Margaret's wedding ring as my burial item when my time comes." He wrote the exception into the personal property memorandum with care. "What about the house where you live?" And he waited for my answer. "Sell it at the right time and add the proceeds to the foundation." He drafted the new will and trust and placed them in 2 stacks. "We need 2 neutral witnesses from our staff for proper execution." 2 staff members entered, and he confirmed their names for the record. He explained each page before signature and noted the key clauses. I signed each document and dated the last page carefully. He notarized signatures and stamped the pages with a raised seal. "These documents take effect immediately on execution," and he nodded once. "Prepare a formal notice to Kyle of the change to beneficiaries. Also prepare a letter removing him from power of attorney roles. We will draft a new medical directive without him listed anywhere," he said. "Do that today, and include an instruction regarding no contact on healthcare." He placed the signed documents in labeled folders and locked them in a cabinet. "Now, there is one more issue we should consider," he continued. "You co-signed Kyle's mortgage and a few credit accounts," he added. I pulled out my notes and showed the guarantor clause I had highlighted. "The mortgage requires 30 days written notice to withdraw my guarantee." He pointed to a paragraph and read the exact notice requirement aloud. "We can deliver notice by certified mail and by in-person service," he said. "Prepare the notice and address it to First Riverbank Mortgage Department. We should also review any personal guarantees tied to business trade accounts. List them and prepare withdrawal notices wherever allowed by contract language." He compiled a list while I checked my files for names and account numbers. "These steps will remove you from liability going forward," he summarized. "Yes, that is the goal, and I understand the remaining past exposure." He leaned back and asked one last confirming question in a softer tone. "Are you making these choices from a clear mind and steady judgment?" "Yes, I am clear, and my purpose is consistent with Margaret's values." He nodded and closed the file with a clean motion. "I will courier all notices and provide delivery confirmations by tomorrow." "Send me copies and mark any responses for immediate review," I replied. He slid an envelope across the desk with temporary cards for the foundation. "This contains the new tax identification number and the opening deposit forms." "Thank you." And I placed the envelope in my briefcase for the drive home. I left his office and walked to my car in measured steps. I sat behind the wheel and rested my hands on the steering wheel. I checked my watch and planned the next steps on a small pad. I wrote down 3 calls to make before the day ended. First, notify the company accountant about the new trust and foundation accounts. Second, schedule time with the bank to update personal beneficiaries and titles. Third, set an appointment with Pastor Allen to confirm board acceptance. I drove home and placed the signed copies in the fireproof safe. I opened the company email and sent a summary to the accountant. I scheduled a morning bank meeting with a clear subject line. I marked the mortgage notice date on my calendar in red. I prepared a short message to Kyle with a plain subject heading. Estate documents updated. You are no longer a beneficiary. Contact Robert Chen only. I saved the draft for legal review before sending it out. I made a fresh checklist for tomorrow and set it beside the phone. I looked at Margaret's note on the desk and read it again. Please don't let Kyle forget us, written in simple script and steady lines. I ended the day without television and set the alarm for 6 a.m. I rested my hands on the kitchen table and kept my back straight. I planned to attend the country club board meeting tomorrow afternoon. I would answer any direct questions with dates and facts, not opinions. I would speak in plain terms and let the record stand on its own. The network values image, and Kyle often used that network to shield himself. Would those people cover for him tomorrow, or would standards finally hold? The country club board met at 4, and I arrived 5 minutes early. I walked into the conference room and greeted the members by name. I sat near the end of the table and kept my folder closed. The chair opened routine business and then moved to member comments without delay. A hand went up, and I heard a steady question about the funeral. People asked where Kyle was yesterday, and the chair kept his tone formal. Kyle chose his wife's party over his mother's funeral, and I answered plainly. The room went still, and several heads turned toward the door. I added one sentence and kept my eyes level on the chair. He was listed as a pallbearer and did not attend or call. The chair thanked me and moved to the next agenda item without debate. After the meeting, 2 members spoke to me in the hallway quietly. We are sorry for your loss, and they kept their words careful and short. I drove home and left my phone on the kitchen counter. Within 1 hour, calls and texts multiplied across my screen without any reply. Invitations that often included Kyle were withdrawn by hosts without extra comment. A lunch he requested at the club was canceled with a short text. Sophie's yoga studio removed her from the afternoon schedule by email. The salon canceled her regular appointment with a 2-line notice. These were private choices by private businesses, and I took no further steps. I made a checklist for tomorrow that included the bank meeting. I slept through the night and woke up at 6 with a clear head. At 9, I met with the manager at First River Bank. We reviewed the mortgage documents and the guarantor paragraph I had marked. You can withdraw your guarantee with 30 days written notice, he confirmed. We will accept certified mail and in-person delivery for proof, he added. I handed over the signed notice and requested a stamped copy for records. He walked it to the internal mail desk and returned with a receipt. This begins the bank's process on delinquency, and he kept his tone measured. Proceed under your policy and send any updates to my attorney, I replied. I left the bank and sat in my car for a quiet minute. I called Robert Chen and confirmed delivery and next steps on their side. By the end of the week, Kyle called and left a fast message. We hit a cash crunch. Please wire $15,000. We will repay you soon. I did not return the call and forwarded the voicemail to Robert. That evening, Sophie tried 2 credit cards at a local store and failed both. Customer service told her the co-signer had withdrawn the guarantees on the accounts. The utility company sent a shut-off notice after 2 months without payment. Their electricity was disconnected the following day under the posted policy rules. Kyle called after dark and left a bitter message about humiliation and bills. I deleted it and kept my focus on the foundation planning documents. The next week, Kyle attended 2 job interviews and received no offers. He called again and blamed the story for the rejections across town. He said he was being treated unfairly by people protecting my reputation. I want to meet in person, and he asked for a neutral public place. Morrison Park tomorrow at 3. and I sent a short text with the time. I arrived at the park 5 minutes early and stood near the bench. Kyle walked up wearing a wrinkled shirt and avoided eye contact. "I know I messed up, Dad," and he reached for a quick excuse. "We were under pressure yesterday and made a poor decision," he added. "Your mother was buried without her son present." And I held the point. He looked at the ground and tried a softer voice and slower pace. "I love Mom, and I am grieving in my own way," he said. "When is your mother's birthday?" And I watched his face for a beat. He paused, guessed June 15th, and waited for a reaction from me. October 12th, and I kept my tone even and my hands still. "What was her favorite flower?" And I kept my questions direct. "Roses," he answered, and his eyes shifted left toward the path. "Daisies," and I took Margaret's journal from my briefcase and opened it. I read 2 lines written in her careful script without raising my voice. "I am worried Kyle only loves our money," and I closed the book. He looked angry and then guilty in fast turns across a few seconds. "That's not fair. I have been busy. But I love you both. You missed chemo appointments and you missed the funeral," and I stayed firm. He stepped closer and tried one more argument about hard times and debts. "You can help me get through this, and we can reset things. You are 35 and responsible for your own choices," and I stopped there. He raised his voice and warned me about contesting the will later. He accused me of acting from anger and destroying his career and marriage. "My choices protect your mother's memory and the people who work for me." "We are finished with this discussion today," and I stepped back from the bench. He walked away fast and did not look back from the park path. I watched him leave and then sat for 1 minute to calm down. Training taught me to hold a position under pressure and control my tone. I returned home and updated Robert on the conversation and the concerns. Over the next month, the bank sent Kyle 3 letters about delinquency. The mortgage moved from late to default under the written schedule. Robert received copies of each notice for our file without delay. I drove past Maple Avenue once and saw a yard sign about the sale. I did not stop, and I did not speak to anyone on the sidewalk. Kyle tried 2 more credit applications, and both were denied immediately. He sold his golf clubs and a few electronics to cover basic expenses. The BMW was gone, and a used sedan replaced it with a short-term loan. Sophie posted a message about moving plans and then removed it later. 2 months after the notice, the bank scheduled a foreclosure auction date. Robert forwarded the public notice with the address, time, and terms in print. I circled the date on my calendar and kept the morning schedule open. On the day of the auction, I parked across from the courthouse steps. A small crowd gathered near the posted schedule without speaking loudly. The auctioneer read the property description and called for the opening bid. An agent raised a card with a clean movement and a neutral face. A second bidder responded, and the 2 of them traded numbers. The agent represented a holding company formed by my attorney for clean title. The bidding reached a number equal to the remaining mortgage and fees. The agent called the next number and waited with the card raised. The auctioneer looked around the crowd and announced the result. "Sold," he said, and wrote the final amount on a printed sheet. Kyle turned and spotted Robert across the plaza at that exact moment. He recognized him and understood the structure behind the winning agent. He pushed forward and tried to speak to the agent directly. A deputy stepped between them and asked everyone to keep distance. Sophie shouted at me from the edge of the crowd and pointed at the steps. "You stole our home. You planned this since the funeral," she yelled. "The bank followed its policy and sold a house in default," I answered. "I withdrew a guarantee under contract and did nothing more," I added. She tried to move closer, and the deputy raised his hand for space. Kyle stopped her and looked at me with a strained face and tight jaw. "You could have stopped this today," and his hands shook at his sides. "You had many chances before today, and I kept my words short." He looked toward the house keys on a ring in Sophie's purse. He stared at the keys, and then at Robert, standing 15 feet away. "We will sue you for everything," and he aimed his voice at Robert. Robert kept his voice calm and told him to contact his own counsel. He confirmed the sale and told Kyle to expect the bank's written schedule. I turned and walked to my car without looking back at the steps. I sat in the driver's seat and watched my hands on the wheel. I was steady, and I did not feel a desire to argue. 2 weeks later, the moving truck arrived at Maple Avenue early in the morning. Kyle loaded boxes while Sophie carried clothing on hangers to the curb. Neighbors watched from their porches and then went back inside. A city worker posted a notice on the door with blue tape. Kyle made a final call that evening and asked for one more meeting. "I have nowhere to go, and I need your help right now. Apply for steady work and follow the terms we discussed at the park." He said he would try, and he hung up without another comment. He did not call again for a month after that final exchange. During that month, the foundation paperwork moved from setup to action. We opened the foundation account and set initial scholarship criteria in writing. We joined a partnership with a community center to tutor students after school. I reviewed applications at my desk and read short statements about need. I met with Pastor Allen and Linda to confirm board roles and duties. We selected the first scholarship group and scheduled a small award event. I did not invite Kyle or Sophie to the event at the center. On the morning of the awards, I visited Riverside Cemetery before the program. I placed fresh daisies on Margaret's grave and spoke 2 simple sentences. "The foundation is working, and your name will be on every award." I stood still for 1 minute and kept my hands folded in front. Later that week, I drove by Maple Avenue and saw a new family outside. 2 children rode small bikes on the driveway while an adult adjusted a seat. I pulled over and approached the adult with a straightforward introduction. "I used to know the owners," and I gestured towards the house. He told me they had purchased through the auction process and moved in quickly. I wished them well and encouraged them to enjoy the neighborhood. I returned to my car and made a note about a donation plan. The next day, the bank sent confirmation of title transfer and account closure. Robert filed the closing documents and updated the foundation records. Kyle left 2 short messages about temporary work and a small apartment. He said he was paying weekly and trying to stabilize expenses and routine. I kept both messages in my archive and did not respond to either. A week later, I visited Morning Glory Diner and ordered coffee and eggs. Kyle worked behind the counter and looked up when I sat down. He walked over with a menu and met my eyes for 1 second. "How are you doing, Dad?" And he placed the coffee on the table. "I am well," and I added 1 plain sentence about the day's schedule. "I am sorry for missing the funeral," and his voice was low and steady. "Sorry is a start," and I picked up the fork and took a small bite. "I am working nights here and picking up shifts at the gas station. Keep working and keep paying your own bills," and I kept the pace slow. He nodded once and walked back to the counter without more words. I paid the check and left a normal tip on the table before leaving. That afternoon, the county posted the final record of the foreclosure sale. The paperwork closed the Maple Avenue chapter under the law. I opened my desk drawer and looked at Margaret's journal again. I read the last line she wrote about hope and adult responsibility. I closed the book and placed it back in the drawer for safekeeping. The next morning, I met with the contractor who led our community center project. We walked the hallway and marked 3 rooms for computer labs with tape. I signed a change order and set a new completion date with penalties. We scheduled the dedication day for October 12th, Margaret's birthday. I printed the program and added daisies to the simple decoration plan. A week later, the Chamber of Commerce held a small luncheon downtown. I attended and spoke briefly about the foundation and trade scholarships. Several business owners asked about training positions for scholarship recipients. I collected names and promised to follow up within 48 hours. After the luncheon, I received a text from Sophie that said 1 line. "You will regret what you did to us," and nothing else followed. I archived the message and did not respond to her direct threat. That night, Kyle called and spoke in a different tone than before. "I am trying to fix my life, but I need time and a plan. Time is your responsibility, not mine. and I held the boundary in place. Can we at least talk about a path that is fair to both? Work, keep records, and pay your obligations on time, and I repeated. He agreed to send me a monthly summary of work hours for accountability. I allowed that, and ended the call before it drifted into old patterns. At the end of the month, he sent a photo of 2 pay stubs. He also sent proof of rent paid and utilities current at his new place. I saved the files and replied with one short line of encouragement. Keep going. And I meant the words in a direct and simple way. I slept well that night and woke up with a clear mind again. The next day, I reviewed the final invoices for the center build-out. I approved payment and scheduled equipment delivery for the computer labs. The vendor confirmed a morning install and an afternoon network test plan. We stayed on schedule and met every posted milestone for the project. On the dedication day, I arrived early and walked through the hall. The rooms were clean and the computers were ready for use. Pastor Allen opened with a short prayer and a sentence about service. I gave brief remarks and thanked the donors and the staff by name. We cut a ribbon at the main door, and people clapped in a steady rhythm. I noticed Kyle standing near the back and keeping distance from the crowd. He stayed through the speeches and left before the refreshments began. I did not approach him, and he did not approach me that afternoon. Later, I received a text from him that read only 5 words. I am proud of you, and nothing else was attached. I stared at the text for 10 seconds and put the phone down. I walked outside and took one slow breath in the parking lot. I looked at the sign on the building and read Margaret's name clearly. The work was real, and the rules that supported it were firm. I had enforced those rules at heavy cost to old habits and expectations. I considered the day's images and the last months of effort and change. I asked myself one question before locking the office and heading home. What price will this victory still demand from both of us tomorrow? I woke the next morning steady and kept to a simple routine. I checked the foundation accounts, reviewed the center schedule, and cleared my inbox. I deleted Kyle's birthday reminder and removed his name from my holiday list. I kept Margaret's note inside the desk where I could reach it. I visited the center and walked each room with the site supervisor. The hall smelled faintly of new paint, and the floors were clean. I met 2 volunteers and introduced the first scholarship recipients by name. You earned these awards, and I handed each student a simple folder. A student asked about service hours, and I pointed to the tutoring plan. 2 afternoons a week, and I showed the whiteboard with time slots marked. The contractor reported a small delay on networking equipment and requested a change order. I reviewed the clause and signed the order with a revised completion date. I returned to the office and kept the company work on schedule. A foreman asked about a promotion after handling a difficult project on time. Prepare a materials plan for Ridgeview, and I put a date on the task. He nodded, then left the room with a focused look and straight shoulders. I updated the board minutes and sent copies to Pastor Allen and Linda. I wrote a short note for the donors about progress and upcoming needs. That afternoon, Kyle texted a photo of 2 fresh pay stubs again. He attached proof of rent paid and a receipt for the electric bill. I am trying to stay current this month, and the text ended. Continue, and I sent that one word with a period and nothing else. The next day, the Ramirez family requested a brief meeting at the center. They wanted to thank the foundation for the renovation support and referral. Their youngest brought a drawing of the house with tidy lines and bright colors. We will hang this in the homework room, and the child smiled once. I delivered 3 used laptops from a donor and logged the transfer. The family signed a simple receipt for the equipment and the donation. On Friday, the accountant reviewed the trust and foundation books with care. Cash flow is stable, and filings are ready for quarter end, he reported. I asked for a reserve plan and a forecast through the next 2 quarters. He presented a chart and a table, and we agreed on adjustments. Saturday morning, I attended the church breakfast and sat near the end. Grace from the choir refilled the coffee urn and handed me a cup. Thank you, Grace. And I stood to help carry the plates. She nodded and mentioned the scholarship night with a clear voice. Good work, and she smiled briefly without a long pause. We kept the conversation simple and returned to serving tables on time. That afternoon, Kyle called during a quiet moment at my kitchen table. "Can we talk about a real plan that helps both of us move forward? We can discuss a plan that depends on your work, not my money." "I understand." And he waited 10 seconds before asking for next steps. "Send me a monthly summary, then add proof of counseling attendance," I said. "Volunteer twice a month at the center and follow instructions from staff. No loans." And I kept that line clear and at the center. "Understood." And he asked for a start date and a point of contact. "Start this week and report to the program coordinator during office hours." He repeated the requirements once, then thanked me and ended the call. On Monday, he arrived at the center and stood at the office door. He wore a clean polo and brought a small notepad in his pocket. The coordinator gave him a list of tasks and watched for follow-through. He carried folding chairs, assembled computer carts, and labeled storage bins carefully. When a student asked for help logging in, he waited for staff guidance. He followed the instruction and did not push beyond assigned duties. At the end of the shift, he signed out and said one line. "See you Thursday," and he left without seeking me out that day. I observed from a distance and did not step into the hallway. The coordinator later sent a short report about reliable attendance and effort. On Thursday, Kyle returned and checked the room list without delay. He wiped tables, sorted cables, and helped unpack 3 boxes of books. He did not ask for credit and did not try to be noticed. At the end, he signed the log and left in quiet order. That evening, Sophie sent a string of messages and ended with one line. "You are freezing us out to look noble," and nothing else followed. I archived the thread and kept the phone face down on the desk. Sunday afternoon, I invited 2 scholarship students and their parents for dinner. We kept the meal simple and focused on next semester plans and dates. After they left, I washed the dishes and wiped the counter once. I did not turn on the television and read a summary of grants. I prepared a list of regional funds and deadlines before going to bed. The next week, the center passed the network test and final phase review. We announced open hours for seniors and students to use the lab. A retired teacher offered to supervise 2 mornings each week in winter. "Welcome," and I showed her the schedule and the login sheet format. She nodded and wrote her start date on the calendar in block letters. After work, I met Grace for coffee at the diner near the library. We talked about the center and the tutoring shift she could cover. "I can help on Wednesdays after choir," and she checked her phone. "That works," and I sent the coordinator a confirming text while we spoke. Kyle cleared a table across the room and pretended not to notice me. He carried a tub of dishes toward the kitchen and kept his head down. Grace saw him and kept the conversation on center tasks and times. She did not pry, and I did not add personal details about Kyle. After coffee, we walked to the door and stood by the coat rack. "Let me know if you need extra hands Saturday," and she smiled again. "I will." And we left it at that and stepped outside. The next morning, I met with the bank to close a small account. The teller recognized the foundation name and asked about volunteer needs. I handed her a flyer with the schedule and contact email printed clearly. She promised to post it in the break room with manager approval. At noon, Robert called with an update on a minor account response. A creditor confirmed my guarantee withdrawal and cleared my file without reservation. He sent the letter by email, and I saved it to the trust folder. That evening, Kyle texted his month-end summary with worksheets attached. He noted hours at the diner and gas station and added totals. He attached a receipt for rent and a screenshot of utility payments. I responded with one line after reading each item carefully. "Good progress. Keep your commitments next month." And I closed the thread. 2 days later, he arrived early and asked to speak for 1 minute. "Can I apply for the apprenticeship intake at Reed Construction?" he asked. "Yes, but you must enter the pool with everyone." And I waited. No exceptions, and I held his eyes without moving or speaking further. "Understood," and he took the application packet from the front desk. He left the building and did not linger in the lobby or the lot. That week, the country club asked me to address a small gathering. I accepted and spent 12 minutes on scholarships and trade careers. We need mentors for students entering apprenticeships, and I raised one hand. 2 members volunteered and set times to visit the center next month. After the talk, a woman offered a donation for computer maintenance. I thanked her and recorded the pledge in the donor log on my phone. The next day, the apprenticeship committee reviewed applications in a quiet room. We evaluated resumes with names covered to protect a fair process. When Kyle's materials appeared, I kept my eyes on the criteria sheet. The scores placed him in the middle of the interview list without preference. I initialed the page and moved to the next file in the stack. Interviews took place in a small office with a glass wall divider. Each candidate answered the same 10 questions about safety and reliability. Kyle sat down, adjusted his posture, and looked at the panel. "Why should we believe you will show up on time?" asked the superintendent. "I have been on time for every shift for 2 months," he answered. He presented his pay stubs and his volunteer sign-in sheets from the center. The panel noted punctuality and asked about teamwork during stressful days. He described managing a dinner rush without losing orders or tempers. He left the room and waited in the lobby for the result. We scored the interviews and combined them with the initial reviews. Kyle placed near the cutoff for the program, but inside the line. We posted the list publicly and emailed start dates and safety orientation times. He received the email and sent me a short note without extra words. "Thank you for a fair process," and nothing else appeared on the screen. I forwarded his name to the training coordinator with no special instruction. That weekend, I invited Grace to the center to plan a Wednesday shift. We walked through the homework room and checked supplies on the shelves. She wrote a short list of pencils, paper, and simple snacks. "I will bring these next week," and she folded the paper once. On Monday, Kyle began the apprenticeship and signed the safety acknowledgement. He received an orange vest, hard hat, and gloves from the supply cage. The trainer covered rules about ladders, protective gear, and tool check-in. Kyle worked through the first week without an absence or a safety violation. Each evening, he sent a brief summary of hours and tasks completed. He included a photo of his signed timesheet at week's end. I replied with one line and left it there to avoid old patterns. "Stay on course," and I saved the message thread in a new folder. That Friday, the center held a small tutoring night for scholarship families. I set up chairs and watched Grace help a student with algebra. Kyle stacked boxes quietly and returned to the sign-in desk twice. He asked the coordinator for each next task, rather than guessing at needs. When the night ended, he carried trash to the bin and washed his hands. He walked over and stood at a respectful distance from my chair. "I am not asking for help," and he paused for a second. "I am asking for another month to prove this is real," he continued. "Do the work, and let the record speak." And I stood. He nodded, returned the chair cart, and left through the side door. The following week, Sophie posted a public message accusing me of cruelty. Friends forwarded screenshots and asked whether I planned to respond in public. I did not respond online and did not engage through private messages. I called Robert to note the post for the file and left it there. A day later, Sophie tried to enter the center during open hours. The coordinator checked the list and asked her to leave the hallway. She argued, raised her voice, and refused to move toward the exit. Security walked her to the door, and she left with 2 quick steps. The coordinator filed an incident report and sent a copy to me and Robert. That night, I received a text from Kyle that contained one sentence. I did not know about her visit, and the message ended. Keep your focus on your commitments, and I closed the conversation. 2 weeks passed with steady reports and no incidents at work or the center. The Ramirez children attended homework club and used the lab twice weekly. The retired teacher ran the room with a clear routine and short rules. Grace's Wednesday shift became a reliable anchor for new volunteers. She and I met once a week for coffee across from the library. We talked about books and schedules and the next fundraising event. We did not discuss Kyle unless his work affected a center shift. One evening, Kyle approached me outside the building after a volunteer session. I read Mom's journal entry again, and he looked down once. I understand the sentence about money now, and he lifted his head. I want to repair what I can repair, even if it takes years. Repair starts with daily proof, not speeches, and I kept the exchange short. He nodded and walked away toward the bus stop without further comment. The next morning, I sent a message about an extra Saturday shift. The coordinator needed help setting up new tables for a training room. Kyle replied in one line and confirmed his attendance for the full morning. He arrived early and finished every assigned task on the list. He signed out and left before the public hours began. I marked his attendance in the log and closed the binder. At month's end, he sent complete pay records and a rent ledger snapshot. Utilities were current, and 2 small debts showed a payment plan started. I replied with a simple note and a question about next month's goals. He listed 3 goals and a target number of volunteer hours. I read the list twice and saved it to the folder on my desktop. The center's donor dinner took place at the end of the quarter. I gave a brief update and thanked the volunteers by name from a card. Grace sat at a side table and greeted parents with a warm tone. The superintendent who trained apprentices shook my hand near the door. Kyle shows on time and follows instructions, and he kept it factual. I nodded, thanked him, and made a mental note about sustained performance. Driving home, I considered the past months and the pattern forming. Kyle worked, paid bills, and showed up for others without asking for money. I maintained boundaries, grew the foundation, and accepted help from good people. The pain did not vanish, but it did not control my daily actions. I locked the door, placed Margaret's note on the credenza, and turned off the light. I stood in the quiet for a moment and held a straightforward question. When material advantage recedes and work replaces excuse, what remains of our bond? I woke steady and checked the calendar without rush. The board met at 10, so I reviewed a short agenda on scholarships, volunteer hours, and lab usage. At the center, we confirmed coverage and opened the upstairs room. 20 scholarships funded and maintenance fully reserved, I reported, and we closed the books on time. Pastor Allen asked about demand. I approved 1 more evening slot if staffing held. Afterward, I walked the hall with Grace. I can cover next Wednesday, she said, noting supplies. Coffee after your shift next week. And she nodded once. At home, I read the apprenticeship report. Kyle was on time, safe, and steady, with a fair productivity score. Good, I wrote back, keeping it simple. That afternoon, he texted a pay stub and rent receipt. Staying current, he wrote, with dates. Good, and I returned to paperwork. On Sunday, the Johnsons came to dinner. We discussed their daughter's clinical schedule and transportation. We can add a small transit stipend if the board approves, I said. Later, I stopped at the diner. Kyle refilled my coffee with a low voice. Thanks for not giving up entirely. I am not offering money, and I met his eyes. I know, he said, adjusting his apron. I am staying with the apprenticeship and my shifts. Keep working, keep records, and keep volunteering. The next day, I visited Riverside Cemetery with daisies and a cloth. I wiped the stone, placed the flowers, and stood 1 minute. The center is steady and students are working, I said. Your ring will be with me when my time comes. I added 1 line that matters. I am not moving off these boundaries. On Wednesday, Grace and I ran the homework room. She handled algebra. I checked attendance and logins. A student needed a resume template, so we printed a clean copy. We crossed to the diner after the shift. You have built something that works, she said, touching the program. It works because many people show up on time, and I allowed a small smile. The apprenticeship committee met the next day. Kyle had passed 2 safety checks. Move him to the Ridgeview framing rotation, I approved. No special handling, and HR logged the change. Kyle texted, I will be there at 6 and ready, then included the address. Good, and I returned to grant guidelines. Saturday, we trained new volunteers. I taught checklists and room resets. Grace taught greetings and line flow. Kyle set up chairs, then handed out clipboards and returned carts. He left without seeking a private talk. Monday brought a strong start at Ridgeview. His crew finished the list with no incidents. A photo of framing arrived for the file. That night, Sophie posted another accusation online. Friends forwarded screenshots. I documented it for the legal file and didn't reply. 2 days later, Kyle asked to meet, briefly, at the center. We stood near the supply shelves. I read Mom's journal again, he said. She worried I only loved money. I am thinking about what love means without money involved. Love is a pattern of care over time, I answered. It shows in tasks, not requests. He asked about attending the donor breakfast if he set up early. Yes, as a volunteer, not as family to be featured, and I paused. Understood, he said, and he finished the setup list. Small signs of change followed. He sent monthly records on time. He paid a small medical bill and attached the receipt. He attended counseling and forwarded a confirmation letter. He asked to help at the scholarship awards. Logistics only, no speeches, I answered. He agreed and asked for nothing else. On award night, he carried programs, set water, and watched the door. He stacked chairs after the ceremony and moved boxes to storage. Grace sang one song and closed the program in a calm tone. After cleanup, he approached and stayed one step back. Is there a path to be invited to Thanksgiving dinner? Thanksgiving is at the Johnsons, and it is their table, I said. We can discuss a quiet lunch the day after. Lunch sounds good, and he returned to finish the list. The next week, Grace and I finalized the fundraiser agenda and her 2 songs. We planned winter hours and a coat drive. You make clear plans, she said, resting her hand on the table. Clear plans keep people safe and keep promises real. And I held her eyes. Kyle finished another month at Ridgeview without incidents. The superintendent requested one more framing rotation. Approved, and I noted no exceptions on policy or hours. Kyle's records showed improved totals and 2 small debts on a plan. Work your plan and avoid new obligations, I replied. One evening, he knocked at 7:30. I am not here for money, he said. I am here to ask if we can try that lunch plan. Friday at noon at the diner, and I did not step back. Bring your monthly summary and goals. I will be there, and he left the porch. On Friday, we sat in a back booth. He handed me clean copies of receipts, logs, and goals. This is the record I want to see, and I tapped the folder. I am trying to be a man you can trust again. Trust is a pattern over time. He waited and asked one careful question. Can I bring flowers to Mom's grave on her birthday this year? Yes, daisies only, and we meet there at 9, I said. On October 12th, I arrived at 8:55. Kyle waited with daisies in a paper wrap. Place them now, and I stood beside him with my hands together. I miss you, Mom, he said, voice steady and quiet. We stood without speaking for 1 minute. Thank you for the chance to be here, he said. Keep building the pattern, and you will keep earning the time, I answered. At the donor breakfast, Grace's songs welcomed the room. Parents met mentors, and students left with clear steps. I confirmed 2 job interviews for scholarship recipients later that day. A text from Kyle arrived at noon. Thank you for today, and a photo of his timesheet followed. I saved the image and archived the message. I looked around my quiet room and kept one truth in front. Dignity holds when limits are clear and daily actions match the words. Tomorrow will bring work, meals, and normal tasks for people who show up. That is enough for a life I can keep building with steady hands.